But, I mean, is that going to happen, Jennifer? I mean, the fact is that, you know, major universities are opening their doors and welcoming these people. You have major networks opening their doors and trying to make them cute and let them dance on TV. There is no penalty, so it's hard to imagine that when where down the road another Republican gets elected president, they'll just hire these people again. It doesn't feel like, I mean, this is an extreme administration that is dangerous. If you are a Latino right now, you probably need to carry your birth certificate around. I've known people that are carrying them because they're so scared that they're going to be scooped up and stolen. But yet it's fine. Go and dance on TV. It is incredible.
It is. You know, I wrote a column way back when, I think it was around the time that Sarah Huckabee Sanders was denied service at the restaurant, that what we should be doing is shunning these people. Shaming these people is a statement of moral indignation that these people are not fit for polite society. I think any institution, and University of Virginia, for example, for a bit had a relationship with Mark Short, who is now back with the administration. I think it's absolutely abhorrent that any institution of higher learning, any news organization or any entertainment organization that has a news outlet would hire these people. I also want to echo something that my friend EJ said. It's not only that Trump has to lose, but that all his enablers have to lose. We have to collectively, in essence, burn down the Republican Party. We have to level them, because if there are survivors, if there are people who weathered this storm, they will do it again. They will take this as confirmation that, hey, it just pays to ride the waves. Look at me, I've made it through. And so up and down the ticket, federal, state, local offices, the country has to repudiate this. It is not a normal administration. And when these people say, oh, you can't criticize us, it will deter public service, it will deter people who are liars, who are enablers, who are really bad people, and they should be deterred. They don't get to escape accountability. That's all of our job, to hold them accountable for the rest of their lives.
Well, you know, and here's the challenge that I have. And I'm going to turn to my political scientist friend here, Jason. The problem is some of it is normal.
Right.
And that that if you leave, to Jennifer's point, any of them in place, it's not like the next time they get power, they're not going to still despoil the entire landscape to hand over 1.9 million tracts of pristine land in the West, which they're doing right now, to oil and coal companies, which they're doing now. Not because Trump is there, but because a Republican is there. That they're not going to hand our courts over to the far, far right that wants The Handmaid's Tale to be real and a documentary and not a fiction. Right? It's not like they're going to do it again. They're like they're not going to do it again. Mitch McConnell wrote a piece, a very interesting piece this week, in which he talked about how wonderful and important the filibuster is. Because he's already planning that just in case he's in the minority, he's going to keep doing the same thing.
So there's a couple of things with this. Number one, and Jennifer and I actually talked about this a lot last year when Mark Short got hired at UVA. And my feeling at the time was like, okay, it's not a problem to bring in a former Trump administration person if you hold them accountable. If you keep them in an academic environment, like explain this, we want it for historical purposes. But when these people get off scot-free, when they get the nice offices and they don't have to encounter students, they don't have to face protests, they don't have to deal with anybody on campus, that's when it's a problem. And the issue that I see here, look, with the Trump administration, it's going to be the same thing that happened with Bush. All those people.
Remember John Yoo? The guy who wrote the torture memo?
Exactly. All
He's
these
got
people,
a great Senate here at the university.
They hide a couple of years, and then they come back, and somebody gives them a job, and somebody lets them get away with that. And that is the danger of this. If we do not learn how problematic these people are, and finally, I got to say this about Mitch McConnell. This is one of the most disgusting examples of gaslighting I've ever seen. This is a guy who is singularly responsible. In 50 years, if we are all alive after all of this nonsense, he is the person that political scientists will be saying is almost singularly responsible for bringing down any functional republic. Not the dimwit who's in the White House right now. Not the people who are working with him. It was Mitch McConnell who knew the rules and broke them in order to push forward a white nationalist agenda. And that is the kind of guy who we should constantly be holding accountable, and under no circumstances should he ever get a job or anyone who works with him.
Absolutely. You know, somebody said to me this week, and this is, I thought was so smart, that it's almost as if Mitch McConnell's plan is that they know the demographics are what they are, and that the only way they're willing to hand power to the non-white majority in this country ever is if the country is completely a shell and broken, and they'll hand them the broken pieces and keep all the wealth for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend an hour on Mitch McConnell's shady business dealings with his wife, who's a Secretary of Transportation, who has a lot of questionable issues with businesses in China, and how she's helped and aided some of Mitch McConnell's personal interests in Kentucky. He's definitely a problem. I just want to really quickly, before we move on, and shout out the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, who disinvited Fox News this week from sponsoring their conference because of their hateful rhetoric. They're saying, yeah, no, thanks for your offer, but we don't want your money or your association affiliated with our organization and the great work that they do. And it should be a shining example for other outlets to say, this is how you lead, this is how you address some of these issues. And another uncomfortable topic that we have to talk about, life after Trump. Some of our new friends are going to become some of our old friends once you have a Democratic president. I remember a lot of the things that some of these, writers, commentators, activists, et cetera, said when there was a Democrat in the White House. And I wish and hope that they recognize the same very thing that you said, that you're now complaining about, this monster you created. This is what you helped get the situation. Now that he's gone, where do you stand? Are you all of a sudden going to go back to those ways and talk about the next Democratic president? This is why I've always side-eyed everybody now who's a never Trumper. I'm like, yeah, but I remember what you were saying 2 years ago when you were flirting with this guy on shows, et cetera.
Joe Walsh being the first one.
And that's
Another
why,
shout out. Really quick,
something there.
Oh, go ahead, EJ, go ahead.
Yeah, no, well, what I want to say is that's why I think it's so important to repudiate two different kinds of right-wing politics in the next election. Obviously, everything associated with Trump and what's happening at the border and various forms of racism, that's got to be repudiated. But also an extreme right that has really taken over the Republican Party in terms of climate change denial, deregulation, packing the courts. You need that. The next election is so important in rendering a verdict on both of those forms of right-wing politics if we're to have any chance of a different kind of more responsible conservatism and some kind of Republican Party or another party that's not like what it's become over the last 15 years.
Yeah, and Jennifer, as our one former, I think you're now a former Republican at this point, but it is true that the Republican, saying this is not normal, this is not us, actually isn't true, right? That you had a tradition in the Republican movement, in the conservative movement, at least for a long time, of not believing in climate change, of allowing lots of drilling and coal mining and despoiling of the environment, of wanting right-wing. It's not like that is new. Donald Trump is just the perfect vehicle because he doesn't care as long as he's making money, right? So isn't it true that preserving the Republican Party still preserves that? And those folks will just go Joe Walsh will just go right back to being what he was before after Donald Trump is gone.
I can only speak for myself and that phone booth full of never Republicans who mostly work for the Washington Post and appear on the Bulwark website. But my motivation, at least, is twofold, exactly what EJ said. This has become a dysfunctional anti-government party. That is not what the country wants and what it needs. And the proof is in the pudding. The reason they engage in voter suppression is because their underlying agenda is very unpopular. No one's in favor, it turns out, of taking away people's health care. People don't like it when you come after Medicaid and Medicare. So my hope, at least, is that after this debacle, a leveled Republican Party will rethink itself. We'll go back to that wonderful document that Reince Priebus put out in 2012. Remember that? That was the autopsy report.
Remember that?
They had they had to go for immigration reform. They had to shed their nationalist rhetoric. They had to really talk about pocketbook issues, look at it from the point of view of the middle class. That's the only way we're going to get there. And if they don't, then they're going to lose election after election. And frankly, that would be fine, too.
Yeah.
My hope is that the Democrats don't blow it. My hope is that the Democrats are able to pull together a coalition that's large enough to govern.
Yeah.
And that we can have some sane governance for a period of time.
But I got to get Eric in on this too, because the other part is us, right? Is the media,
right? Because
we also, the normalization isn't just coming from the streets. It's coming from the box. It's coming from the TV. It's coming from, there is an insistence that these people ought to be allowed to be normal, that they ought to be on TV, that there are the people we want to hear from. That isn't going to change. By the way, when Trump is gone, don't you think people are going to go, what do you think about President Warren or President,
Oh my God.
Harris's.
Right.
They're going to still ask him what he thinks.
So many things going on. The Republican Party has gotten a complete pass from Trump now. The reporters are tired of saying, what do you think of, they don't say maniac, I will, in the White House. Republicans have said for 2 years, we don't care. No, they get a complete pass, right? Democrats are hammered time after time.
Yes.
If any House representative says something controversial, basically every member of Congress has to issue a statement. So they're normalizing that. And they're normalizing so many other things. I mean, the press won't call him a liar, won't call him a racist. They won't question his mental stability, which after this week in The Chosen One, I mean, if the press isn't going to ask that question.
Hey, we did a whole block on it at A Block. I just want to note that today because I agree with you.
Thank you. That should be. The problem is for so many journalists and so many news organizations, once you do one of those things, call him a liar, call him a racist, question his mental stability. That has to be the only story the rest of his presidency.
Yes.
You can't walk that
But
back.
shouldn't it be-
And they don't want that
They don't
fight for
want
the
that.
next
But it's the
16
reason
months.
Everything else
why.
is
I think the
discussed.
reason
Yes.
why some of this has been normalized, I will constantly beat this drum, the lack of diversity in newsrooms.
yeah.
So, you know,
Absolutely.
and it's not just there. Okay, so you've signed, different faces of color as commentators or pundits. How many people are making editorial decisions?
Absolutely.
How many people in
Absolutely.
top-ranking positions can say, here's guidance on this and we're standing
Right.
by, or stop you from making embarrassing guidance that's a slap in the face to people of
Just
color
a quick
across
point.
the state?
In 2016, the New York Times did a diversity report. 90% of their political team in 2016 was white.
Well,
I don't think
The
it's
entire
changed.
team covering their White
Answer this.
House is
Yes.
white.
It doesn't even
that's reflected
necessarily
in
have to
headlines
come
and
from
things.
something magical. We literally had an entire House of Congress declare that this guy is a racist with actual Republicans who did it. Every single policy out of this administration from now on should be viewed in that frame.
Exactly.
If you have an entire House that says he's a racist, look, if you find out somebody's an alcoholic, you got to figure out where they want to go to happy hour. If you
Right.
find somebody's a child abuser, why are they going to a kids movie? Why can't we use
We
that
have all
same
those
frame?
things in the Trump administration.
Exactly.
All at
In the
once.
Trump administration.
But
should have been clear.
EJ, can I ask EJ, because the reality is I have this set of old New York Times front covers. This artist put them together to show how benign the coverage was even in the 1930s as the world was about to burn down in World War II, and they're just sort of benign things. That it's like a tick of wanting to see world leaders. In that case of Germany, they just want to see them as normal, and I don't know where that comes from, but it is real, and I think it wouldn't be so if those leaders were not white men. I have to say,
White Republican men. Go
white
ahead,
Republican,
EJ.
white conservative, right? That there's a sense that conservatism is normal, and that white conservative men are the norm, and that anything but that. I mean, you have Elizabeth Warren almost being depicted as some sort of crazy, communist, when she's like a totally normal politician that just wants people to have health care.
And by the way, she is gaining ground in the polls and has quite steadily for the last 6 months. Look, I think that from the beginning, when Trump came along, the media had to take a long look at itself and say, we have certain rules that we have applied to normal politicians. And sometimes that allowed them to get away with stuff, but those rules at least had some sense. As soon as Trump came along, I thought at the time, and I wrote it over that period, that you could not in any way treat him like a normal figure. There were certain kinds of people, including various kinds of bloodthirsty dictators, you can't do on the one hand, on the other hand, journalism with them. And while Trump isn't quite there, he is clearly somebody who lied repeatedly, and it took too long to use the word lie, who clearly was a racist, and you saw that going all the way back to birtherism, and it shouldn't have taken so long to use that word. So
Yeah.
I just think that whether you are a white man like I am or an African American or any kind of person, when you looked at Trump, it should have been very clear that those rules just don't work with this guy, and we've got to rethink things in dealing with him. And I think slowly that's happened, but more slowly than I would have liked.
And I'm going to give Eric the last word on this.